Hey, my name's Amber and I'm 48 years old. I'll just get right into my story. I met my ex-husband Wade through work. We got along really well and we started dating shortly after we met each other. We dated for around 2 years before we decided that we were each other's soulmates. So we got married. Now, I want to tell you that I was never big on having kids. Wade, however, had always wanted to have kids. We discussed it a lot when we were dating, and I didn't take it too seriously because I always thought that once Wade and I spent a good portion of our time together after being married, he'd understand that life could be fulfilling without having kids as well. We didn't discuss it for about 2 years after getting married. Instead, we enjoyed all our time together. I had a really good time during those years, and I was pretty sure that Wade also had a great time. So I was really surprised that Wade was still hung up on having children. I'm not even joking when I say that as soon as we hit the 2-year mark in our marriage, Wade began asking me to have kids. I was uncomfortable with it at first, and I told him as much. He would back off for a while, but then he would start asking me again. Eventually, though, I gave in on one condition, and that was that I would only have one kid. If he wanted more, we'd have to either go via surrogacy or adoption. Wade was beyond happy that I had agreed, and we began trying for a child pretty much right after I agreed. After 5 months of trying, I finally fell pregnant with our son. It was not a fun experience initially. I was constantly throwing up and I had the weirdest cravings. Not to mention, I got really sensitive to certain smells, and if it wasn't because of the pregnancy, I was throwing up because of certain smells. Throughout it all, Wade was right beside me. He helped me out to the best of his abilities and tried his best to make me as comfortable as I could feel. After about 6 months of pregnancy, Wade and I had gone to the OB/GYN for my regular checkup. It was then that the doctor noticed that something was off. My heart dropped when the doctor looked at the screen over and over again as she rubbed the device against my belly. She looked concerned, and I couldn't stop myself from asking her if anything was wrong. She told me that my baby was perfectly healthy, except the baby was not developing properly from his waist down. She told me that there was a chance that my child might come out disabled. While there was still time for full development, there was still a pretty high chance that my child would suffer from some form of disability regarding his legs. The drive back home was silent. When we got inside our home, Wade pulled me into his arms. We cried for a little while at the loss of all our perfect family dreams. "I'm so sorry, Wade." "Why are you saying sorry?" "It's all because of me that our son will have to struggle during their life. My stupid body couldn't just produce a healthy child." "Hey, don't you say sorry about a thing. You are not at fault for this. It's just tough luck. It's cruel to our child. I wanted so many things. I know that I wasn't the one who wanted kids, but being pregnant shifted my view by a lot." "I know. I had so many big dreams for our little one. I wanted to play catch with him and maybe even train him in either football or basketball. I wanted to feel the joy of watching him take his first steps and chase him around the house whenever he was being a little naughty. It really is a bad hand that we've been dealt. It's so unfair, Wade. This is not what I wanted for us. My God, I'm sure that this is never what you wanted when you dreamed of having kids." "Well, that is true. I never did imagine having a disabled kid, but you can never predict the future. This is just something we should make peace with." "I'm sorry, Wade." "Why do you keep saying sorry? I told you. There was no need to say it." "I'm saying it because while there was the option to have another child before, through other means, I'm afraid that won't be possible anymore." "What? Why?" "We'll be way too busy with this little one. He'll need all the love and care we can give. I would never want another child in the equation. They would only grow to resent this one and us. I mean, we could always have another child in another, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years? This one will be a little grown up by then. I'm sorry, but I don't want that. You know what? You're really upset right now. Let's just put a pause on this conversation and have it after this one's born. Maybe it was because I was still upset about the news I heard, but hearing Wade talk so casually about having another child made me feel very uncomfortable. He felt very unsympathetic to what was about to happen in our lives. I struggled to behave like everything with him was okay. Wade never brought it up again, and it didn't faze him that I was behaving differently with him. 3 months later, I gave birth to our baby boy, Alvin. Unfortunately, Alvin's nerves that controlled his legs didn't fully develop, so he was left paralyzed below the waist. I was honestly just happy that he was born healthy and with no other disabilities. Wade and I struggled to adapt to our new lives with a newborn. We spent a lot of our nights awake and our days were spent working and taking care of Alvin. We had a lot more doctor visits than normal just to make sure that Alvin was developing well. We were told that we could try medication and surgeries to allow Alvin to at least have some feeling in his legs, and we decided to try that out once Alvin was a little older. Alvin did grow up to be a very smart child. He began speaking when he was nearly 2, and by the time he was 4, he was reading beginner-level novels. I was honestly really proud of him. I was afraid that he'd struggle a little, but he was one of the smartest kids I'd ever met. Of course, Alvin did face discrimination from his peers, and on more than one occasion, we were recommended by his school to put him into special ed. But we saw no reason for it when he was more than capable of sitting through regular classes. After Alvin turned 5, we decided to ask him if he would like to try and see if his legs could get healed. Alvin was adamant about him loving his wheelchair and never wanting to get out of it. Of course, I was really happy to hear that he was so comfortable with himself, but I also knew that in a few years his opinion might change. I was willing to wait for however long Alvin wanted. Wade, however, was not happy with that. Look, I'm just as happy as you are that Alvin's comfortable with how he is, but I really don't think it's right to just leave him be the way he is when there are ways to get him better. There's no need to get him better. He's the best version of himself. He may not be able to walk, but he's still incredibly smart and talented. I completely get that, but if we can make his life easier, why shouldn't we do that? I'm not saying that we won't ever do that. All I'm saying is that we should allow him to tell us when he wants it done. What if when he's older, it's too late to do something? What if now is the best time to do it when his body is just growing and changing? I agree with that, but Amber, he's just a child. We can't possibly put the weight of such a huge decision on his shoulder at this age. If when he grows up he wants something done about it and won't be able to, he'll blame himself and then us. I completely get that, but I also don't want this to shatter his self-esteem in any way. What if he thinks we don't want him to be the way he is, which is why we're going against his wishes and putting him through intense and painful things? If what we choose to do works, he'll be grateful to us. You know, the world is pretty unkind to the disabled. Hell, even we were upset when we found out. Neither of us wanted this, but we have it, and it's up to us to deal with it in the right manner. I hated that Wade made a lot of sense. I was way too clouded by my emotions to think so logically. Wade and I had many conversations about this, and eventually we decided to give it a try. Well, the next year and a half was spent running in and out of hospitals. I was chronically sleep deprived at that point. Whenever Alvin cried in pain, a piece of my heart would shatter. Wade was surprisingly calm throughout it all. He would keep reassuring me that this was for the best, and at some point I stopped believing it. After a year and a half of treatments with no sign of Alvin getting better, I put my foot down and told Wade that we should stop everything. Alvin was happy with himself, and that was all that mattered. Wade tried his best to convince me to keep the treatments going, but I simply couldn't watch Alvin in pain anymore. Not to mention, halfway through all the procedures and surgeries, Wade stopped paying much attention to Alvin and me. It was like he gave up on us. I was the one who did most of the caretaking for Alvin, while Wade got to be too tired from work to come visit his only son. Wade was upset that we were stopping the treatment, but didn't say much. After a few months of Alvin stopping treatment, Wade asked me if we could have a second child. "I need to ask you something." "Oh yeah? What is it?" "I was thinking that Alvin's 7, almost 8 years old right now. Don't you think we should look into having another child?" "What?" "We should at least register ourselves to adopt. They'll need to do thorough background checks on us. And as for surrogacy, well, we'll have to do some more research about it and find someone willing to do that for us." "I'm sorry, but didn't I say that no way was that happening?" "That was years ago, Amber. Haven't you thought about it since then?" "I'm sorry, but when have I had any time to actually think about anything else other than Alvin?" "Okay, well, no need to get so aggressive." "I don't want to get aggressive, but you've been absent for a while now. You've barely been interacting with Alvin, let alone helping me out with taking care of him." "Well, what do you expect of me? I didn't think that my entire personality would have to be about my disabled son." "How can you say something like that?" "Oh, don't try to be a saint, Amber. I know you think that way too." "Don't put your disgusting thoughts on me. I have nothing but love for Alvin, and it is because I love him so much that I know it'll be very unhealthy to bring another child into this family." "So there's absolutely no way of changing your mind?" "No." "Fine then. Whatever happens from here on is your fault." I had no interest in finding out why Wade said what he said. I was furious at him for even thinking about bringing another child into this. It's not like I hadn't thought about it. In fact, for the first few years after Alvin's birth, that was all I could think about. But I did research into it, and I read way too many horror stories about kids feeling left out and neglected when their parents cared for their disabled siblings. This was not necessarily a fault of the parents or the kids. It's just that when one person has severe needs, they do tend to get a lot more attention. I didn't want to do that to another child, especially one that we wanted to give a new home and life to. Wade pretty much stopped talking to me after that. I took a little while to cool down, and when I went to speak to him, he refused to even look at me. I figured that he was still angry, so I let him be for a while, but then his silence lasted a week. I began to get worried, and I kept asking him over and over to talk to me, but he refused to acknowledge me. Alvin also asked me if his dad and I were fighting, and I feebly lied and told him that we were just having a minor disagreement. Before I knew it, a month had passed. I still held out hope for him and kept trying to get him to talk to me. About 3 months into our marriage disintegrating, I found out something that completely shattered everything for me. I found texts between Wade and some woman named Violet on Wade's phone. He showered her with all kinds of compliments and praises and kept telling her that he couldn't wait to meet her again. I read texts of all their plans to meet and all the talks about how great their time together had been. Violet kept asking him when he was going to leave me, and he always told her that things were a little complicated, but he would leave me soon. I was heartbroken. Was Wade's big solution to me not wanting to have more kids to cheat on me with the next woman he found? That was not something I ever expected out of him. I contemplated confronting him about it for a long while, but I ultimately decided against it. Instead, I knew that I needed to be smart. I needed to have my things in order, so when he did eventually give me divorce papers, I needed to have a backup plan in place for Alvin and me. Over the next 9 months, I started working as a content writer. It wasn't a lot of money, but I got enough to save. I kept all of that money a secret and never told Wade about any of it. That was going to be my fallback. And then one day it happened. Wade came back home with a woman on his arm. I politely asked her who she was. Wade, who is this? This is Violet, and she is here to replace you. Replace me? What the hell do you mean by that? Oh, please, I've been miserable this entire year. Hell, these past 10 years have been nothing short of a hellish nightmare for me. How can you say that? Oh, watch me say these things, Amber. I'm going to marry Violet, and I'm going to start a family again, but this time I'll do it the right way. You can't do that. You'll still have to help me and Alvin out. You can't abandon your own son in favor of another child that doesn't even exist yet. Violet's pregnant and we're having a son, and he's normal, unlike that one there. He has a name. Alvin. Be respectful at least. Is cheating on me your way of getting back at me for not having another child with you? Well, I should have ended our relationship a long time ago. I should have known that you were never going to be a good mother. I mean, look at the monster you created. Take that back, you absolute jerk. Look, I want to start a new normal family, so get out and take this crippled fool with you. Here are the divorce papers. I'm giving both of you a week to move the hell out of here. I stared at Wade, with hatred burning in my eyes, but he and Violet looked at me with smirks. I wasn't even mad about the cheating. I was only mad at the way he was disrespecting my son. My son was crying in the corner. He happened to be in the living room when Wade burst in to make his announcement, and he heard everything his father said. I quickly wheeled Alvin into our room and made sure he was okay. I assured them that I did not see him in the same way that his jerk of a father saw him. Once Alvin calmed down, I started to pack whatever things of mine were there in the room. I was going to get out of there before the period that was given to me. Wade had left the house afterwards, and it was only Alvin and I at home. I quickly packed away Alvin's things as well. I carried the divorce papers with me, and I called my mom over. I gave her a quick rundown of everything that happened. She and Dad came over as soon as they could, and they helped us pack up everything that we had and took Alvin and me back to their place. The entire time I was just numb. I couldn't believe that this was what my life had come to, yet I couldn't help but feel better. It was like a huge weight of anxiety had been lifted off my shoulders. The year of silence and the months of having to live knowing about the affair really affected me. After that, with the help of my parents, I got a good lawyer who fought for me to get alimony along with child support. Thankfully, I was granted a good amount for both, and Wade did not look happy about it, but I honestly couldn't care. The next few years were very eventful. While I dealt with my hurt by dissolving myself in work and taking care of Alvin, Alvin dealt with his emotions by participating in Paralympic sports. When he was 16, Alvin had developed a special interest in the wheelchair race and had been training with what he had. But then he approached me about it one day. "Hey, Mom, I needed to ask you about something." "Yes, sweetie, what is it?" "Okay, so you know how I've been training for races?" "Yes, of course, and you've been doing really well too." "Yeah, and that got me thinking, do you think it might be possible for me to actually get proper training to compete nationally?" "Oh, I didn't realize how passionate you were about this." "It's quite exhilarating. I know it'll be expensive considering I will need another wheelchair." "Hush. Nothing is ever too expensive for my baby. I'll do everything I can to make sure you have everything you want and need." "Thanks a lot, Mom." "Of course, sweetie. Now, why don't you go and do some research and bring me all the necessary information? We'll find you the best trainer and wheelchair." And that was how my son started his journey to become a national athlete. He trained hard all day. He would come back home drenched, but I had never seen a smile so large on my boy in years. I was concerned about him straining himself a little too hard, but when I saw him on the track, I couldn't help but feel pride bursting through my veins. Finally, there came the national tournament. Alvin had qualified very easily for it and was set to run the track. My parents, Alvin and I, held a small party to wish Alvin all the best for the event, and we all barely slept that night in anticipation of the next day. The next day, the stadium was abuzz with chants of the names of the racers. I was screaming for Alvin, and he looked in my direction and blew me a kiss. Then the races started, and Alvin smoked the rest of the track racers. I was jumping and screaming for joy. I was so proud of my boy. During the awards ceremony, Alvin was asked to give a speech of gratitude. He thanked me and his grandparents for all the support and love we'd given him. And then he told the crowd that if it wasn't for his deadbeat dad, Wade Lambert, he never would have found joy in athleticism. He addressed Wade as he said that he hoped that Wade saw what the crippled fool had become 10 years later. The crowd erupted in cheers. Alvin's speech ended with getting published in the newspaper. It didn't take long for Wade to call me. "Alvin's an athlete? Did you read the paper? I cannot believe my son is a national level athlete." "Your son? He's not your son." "My DNA flows in his blood. He's just as much mine as he's yours." "I'm sorry, but is this your pathetic way of making up for throwing us out of your house for your mistress?" "No, I just want to tell Alvin that I'm proud of him." "Alvin doesn't care about you. He's proven what he needed, and he's happy with where he's at." "Oh, come on, let me speak to the kid." "Oh, hold on. Are you trying to make reparations because he used your full name and people are getting to know exactly what kind of a fool you are?" "Stop jumping to conclusions and hand Alvin the phone." "Ha ha. Oh, Wade, you never fail to amuse me. I'm not giving the phone to Alvin no matter what you say. Neither is Alvin going to rescind whatever he said. Deal with the consequences of your actions. Goodbye." Nothing brought me greater joy than hearing Wade's voice crack as he pleaded with me to let him speak to Alvin. I knew that other than trying to save face, he also really did want to apologize to Alvin. When I told Alvin of what had happened, he laughed and assured me that he never wanted to speak to Wade ever again. Since his first win, Alvin has gone on to compete in many more races and has always come out on the top. He's made many headlines, and in many of them, he's been open about the way his father had treated him and how that only made him strive to show the world that not all disabled people were helpless. I could not be prouder of him, and I want this to serve as a message to all those who are listening to my story. Be kind to everyone regardless of how they look.